Yo, what's up guys, it's Cozy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we will break down the ins and outs of the second playable character from the Genius Society, number 81 in their rankings, none other than the stunningly beautiful and elegant Ruan Mei.
I have nothing to lose and nothing to gain.
Alright, as usual, we will start this off by taking a look at her traces and Eidolons. Ruan Mei herself is not too difficult to play, but there are still a few things that are noteworthy. After that we will talk about her relics and light cones, and finally we will take a look at team composition. Ruan Mei herself is an ice character that follows the path of harmony. This should already tell you enough when it comes to what she's going to bring to your party. She is a support character, but she brings a fairly interesting mechanic with her. That is because she is the first character that is based all around weakness break. She increases the break effect for your allies, she increases your damage based on her own break effect, she gives you speed, break efficiency, resistance penetration, and she delays the recovery of enemies that are broken whenever her ultimate is up. She is fairly simple to build because there are a few relics and ornaments that are perfectly tailored for Ruan Mei, and one thing to point out here is that break efficiency and break effect are not the same things. We will talk about that later on during the guide, but for now let us take a closer look at her traces, and we will kick this off by talking about her skill. After using String Sing Slow Swirls, Ruan Mei gains Overtune. Overtune is active for 3 turns and you lose 1 stack whenever she takes action. You can see the current stacks right beneath her character window, and once it's about to run out, you basically reapply it by using her skill again. Overtune itself will increase the damage you do by up to 35% depending on your skill level, and it will also increase your allies' break efficiency by a whopping 50%. Once again, we will talk about the difference between break effect and break efficiency later on. Moving on, we have Ruan Mei's ultimate. Being the genius she is, Ruan Mei deploys a field for 2 turns that will increase the resistance penetration of your allies by up to 27%. On top of that, each attack you do will apply Thanate or whatever. It will apply Rebloom to your enemies. When a weakness broken enemy tries to recover, Rebloom will be triggered, the duration of the weakness break will be extended, and his action will be delayed by 20%. It will also do some damage, but the important thing here is that it will basically extend your weakness break. One thing to point out here is that this effect can only happen once. You can't keep your enemies in a constant weakness break chain. As such, the next time your enemy is trying to recover, he will indeed recover. After that, we have her talent. Somatotypical Helix, and I hope I pronounced that right, will increase the speed of your team, except for Ruan Mei herself, and whenever allies break an opponent, Ruan Mei will also do some ice damage to them. And lastly, when it comes to active skills, we have her basic attack. And it's just that, a basic attack that does some ice damage. But you will use it fairly often on her because she is fairly skill point friendly. After all, you only need to apply her skill every 3 turns. Next we have her passives, and for that let us move on to her talent window. Before we get into her actual passives, let us quickly talk about her technique because we haven't done that so far. When activating her technique, Ruan Mei gains Silken Serenade. Outside of the simulated universe, it will basically apply her skill at the start of the battle. But inside the simulated universe, it will do some additional things. First of all, whenever you attack an opponent, it will be considered as a weakness break attack, regardless of the character you use in order to attack. Secondly, it will deplete an opponent's weakness bar, and it will even increase an efficiency the more blessings you have. There's some more detailed stuff to it, but you can read that on your own. Moving on, we have her bonus abilities. All 3 of them are fairly good. Inert Respiration increases the break effect of your allies by 20%, so quite big, quite a lot, right? Candle Lights on Still Water will increase the damage your allies do by up to 36%. You get 6% for every 10% of Ruan Mei's break effect that goes beyond 120%. And according to my math, that will basically cap out at 180%. Let me know if I'm right there. You can write it down in the comments. And finally, we have Days Rain Thoughts Wax. It will give our number 81 of the Genius Society 5 energy when her turn starts. All the other minor traces increase her speed, break effect, as well as her defense rating. Alright, so next up we have the one topic that I said we would talk about later on, which is weakness break efficiency as well as weakness break effect. And I'm gonna assume that most people already know what it is, right? They know the difference between them, but for those that are either new to the game or never really paid attention to it, let us quickly talk about it. And let me already tell you, it doesn't really take too long because it is fairly simple. Weakness break efficiency refers to how fast you are going to break your opponent's weakness bar. As simple as that. Weakness break effect refers to whatever effect you're going to apply to your opponent after you broke their weakness, right? Every single element does have a different weakness break effect, and if you want to know more, then just go into the game, click on the elements, and you will see whatever effect certain elements have. But generally speaking, if you increase, let's say, the weakness break effect damage, that enemy will take damage after they recover from the weakness break, right? And if you increase that by using weakness break effect, then you will simply increase the damage you do with that weakness break. And with that, we talked about all of her talents. As you can see, Ruan Mei is pretty good when it comes to the impact she has on a fight. She buffs the damage you do, and she keeps your opponents in a weakness break state, which is quite good actually. Right? I really like her kit a lot. Following that, we have her Eidolons, and they increase the efficiency of her entire kit by a lot. Eidolon 1 basically increases your damage by 20% whenever her ultimate is active. Eidolon 2 will give you 40% more attack when attacking enemies that are in a weakness broken state. Eidolon 3 and 5, they do the same as they always do, not a whole lot to talk about here. Eidolon 4 increases Ruan Mei's break effect by 100% after an enemy was broken. This one is active for 3 turns, but considering that you are most likely breaking an enemy more often than every 3 turns, this Eidolon is basically active all the time. And Eidolon 6, it gives you +1 on your ultimate duration, and it will also increase the talents multiplier by 200%. So all of her Eidolons are fairly good when it comes to her kit. They make her more consistent when it comes to it, but I would say that even without Eidolons, she's already in a pretty good place, especially because so far we don't really have characters that work with weakness break, and she as such brings a new meta to the game. Alright, next up we have light cones and relics, and this time we're gonna kick this off by talking about her light cones. In my previous guide, which was a Navia guide by the way, so if you're interested in Navia then go ahead and check it out. I will leave a link to it in the description box. But either way, there was some guy complaining about the fact that I didn't include every single possible weapon for Navia in the guide, which, I mean, I guess he's kind of right about that, right? So this time around, we're gonna include every single light cone you can possibly use on Ruan Mei. And the first one is Path Self in Mirror. It's her signature light cone. Frankly speaking, it's her best in slot weapon, so if you have it, use it. It gives you break effect, it gives you a damage increase to your allies after you use your ultimate, and it will also give you 1 skill point whenever your break effect exceeds 150%, which it most likely is going to do, considering that Ruan Mei is a break effect character. And finally, it will also give you 20 energy to all your allies after the beginning of a new wave. Right, so keep that in mind. New wave, not new turn, right? That's important here. Next up, we have Bronya's signature light cone, but the battle isn't over. It gives you energy regeneration, it gives you 1 skill point after you use your ultimate, and it will also increase the damage you do after you use your skill. This might be a little bit of a problem when it comes to Ruan Mei, because you kind of don't need to apply your skill every single turn, right? We talked about it earlier, Ruan Mei is fairly skill point friendly. If you're using this light cone, this basically changes, right? Because you're now going to use her skill every single turn, if possible. So keep that in mind. It might not be the best option for Ruan Mei, but then again, there are only 2 5-star light cones in the game for Harmony characters, so yeah, if you have it, you can use it as well. The next light cone is a 4-star light cone. It is Carves the Moon, Weaves the Clouds, and it's Personally, I don't really like it because of the whole RNG aspect to it, especially when it comes to Ruan Mei. Because there are 3 passive effects you can gain from it. Attack, crit damage, and energy regeneration, and it's going to cycle those effects. In the case of Ruan Mei, attack and crit damage is kind of useless, right? She's your support character, so what you want to have is energy regeneration if possible. The other 2, if you get them, they're kind of useless because Ruan Mei is not really going to do that much damage in your team. So this light cone, if you have it, you can use it, but I wouldn't. After that, we have Hook's light cone. I guess you could call it Hook's light cone, right? It's dance, dance, dance. It's a fairly straightforward light cone. It gives you action advancement to your other characters after you use your ultimate. And yeah, that's kind of it, right? It's a light cone you're probably going to have. You might even have superimposition level 5. I don't know, maybe not, but it's a light cone that is fairly quote-unquote accessible. So if you have it, you can use it. It's a good one for Ruan Mei. After that, we have Past and Future. It basically is a miniature version of her signature light cone because it will give you 16% increased damage after you use your skill. And by her light cone, I mean Bronya's light cone, not Ruan Mei's light cone, right? So this one, once again, just like Bronya's light cone, is kind of the same because you now need to use your skill in order to effectively use her passive or the passive effect of the light cone. So keep that in mind. Once again, just like Bronya's light cone, might not necessarily be the best option for Ruan Mei. Which brings us to our last 2 remaining light cones. First we have Planetary Rendezvous. This one basically increases the damage you do if your main DPS character has the same element as Ruan Mei. Ruan Mei is an ice character, so the only character, or the only 2 characters that come to mind here are Jingliu and what's this guy? What's his name? You know, the guy with his ice swords. I don't know. I forgot the name. Either way, you know who I'm talking about. Right, those are the only 2 characters you can really use when it comes to this light cone. So, if you are using a Jingliu composition, it is fairly good, right? But if you're not using that, then it just falls off completely. Completely useless otherwise. And lastly, we have one light cone which is fairly good for Ruan Mei, and that is Memories of the Past. It increases your break effect, which, I mean, goes hand in hand with Ruan Mei, and it will also give you energy regeneration. Right? As simple as that. Those are all the light cones you can use on Ruan Mei. Obviously, like I said, her signature light cone is her best in slot light cone. If you have it, use it. If you don't have it, it kind of depends on your team composition. Right, the light cone that increases the damage for a character of the same element is fairly good in a Jingliu composition, but also the light cone we mentioned last, right? It's a, generally speaking, Memories of the Past is a fairly good light cone for Ruan Mei. Alright, next up we have Relics. And in the case of Ruan Mei, both the ornaments and the relics are fairly simple. Ruan Mei herself is not too difficult to build. When it comes to relics, you are most likely going to use 2 different sets. The Messenger set as well as the Thief set. The Messenger set, you all know it, right? It gives you speed and speed to your allies after you use your ultimate if you're using the 4-piece bonus, which, I mean, why not, right? So this set is really good if you are trying to go into a support kind of direction, right? The other set, the Thief set, is if you're trying to go into a weakness break direction, right? If you're trying to incorporate her traces a little bit more into the gameplay, right? So it gives you break effect for the 2-piece as well as the 4-piece, and it gives you energy regeneration after breaking an opponent, which you are doing quite often, right? So fairly good. When it comes to stats, head and hands always have the same, right? HP and attack. Body, there are 2 options you can go for here. Attack or HP. You don't need crit rate, you don't need crit damage, you don't need defense rating. Crit rate and crit damage completely fall off because Ruan Mei is not going to do any damage anyway, so attack and HP are the stats you can choose from. Feat, basically the same, attack or speed. Personally, due to the fact that Star Rail is a turn-based game, I would say to always go speed. More turns in a turn-based game equals money, I guess, right? So that's what you should be aiming for. When it comes to substats, very simple. I mentioned it earlier, Ruan Mei is not your DPS character, you don't need crit rate, you don't need crit damage, but you want to have break effect due to her traces, right? And you want to have speed, basically. Just like the boots, the more speeds you have, the more speeds. The more speed you have, the better it becomes. Other stats you could possibly go for maybe are HP, effect resistance as well as defense in order to increase her survivability. After that, we have her ornaments, and in my opinion, there are 2, maybe 3 sets that come into mind here. We have Talia, Kingdom of Banditry, we have Broken Keel, and ironically, in my opinion, we have Penacony. First up, Broken Keel. You all know it, right? It increases your effect resistance by 10%, and if you get to 30% or higher effect resistance, all your allies gain 10% crit damage. This one, obviously, try to use it in a team where crit damage is important. If you're using a Kafka team, for example, then that set is kind of useless, right? After that, we have Penacony's Grand Hotel. This one is a very, very specific set. Right now, it might not be that good. But once we get to a point where you can play a ice mono composition, this set becomes really good. Just imagine using Jingliu as your main DPS, and then 3 other ice characters, and every single one is going to use that set. That basically translates to 30% increased damage, as well as some energy regeneration, right? So, in theory, a really good set that might become useful in the future once we get to mono teams. But for now, not really that good. I would rather use Broken Keel or the Bandit set, because this one will give you break effect. So let us move on to that one. The Bandit set, let's see, there we have it. Talia's Kingdom of Banditry, basically it gives you break effect, and it will also give you 20% more break effect if your speed reaches 145 or higher. That is why I was talking about speed that much earlier on, right? Your boots, your substats and all of that stuff. If you get 145% speed, you gain even more break effect, which you can easily, if you're, for example, if you have her signature light cone and the correct sets and everything, you can easily have over 300% break effect, which is kind of broken because your enemies are basically no longer doing anything, right? So yeah, those are the sets. Once again, in the case of Keel, I want to point this out in order to make it absolutely clear. It gives you crit damage, right? So if you're using a Kafka composition, kind of useless, right? If you're using a Kafka composition, maybe go for Talia, or maybe, no, just Talia, I guess. Talia is the only one you can really use in that case, unless you go for attack increase and stuff like that, right? But yeah, those are the 3 sets that I would advise using. You can also use the other sets, obviously. It depends a little bit. Sometimes it depends on your substats and all of that stuff. So yeah, when it comes to the main stats on your ornaments, for the sphere you can use ice damage, but you can also use HP. Once again, I mentioned it earlier, Ruan Mei is not going to do that much damage to begin with, so ice damage is kind of useless, but you can use it in order to min-max. HP is probably your better friend because it increases her survivability. But then again, I did try her out a lot on the media server, and I didn't really struggle when it comes to survivability, so ice damage is probably the best way to go. When it comes to her link rope, you're basically using energy regeneration in order to use her ultimate as often as possible. Everything else kinda falls off. You can use break effect if you're struggling to reach certain break effect thresholds, right? For the Talia set, for example, well, the Talia set is speed, so it doesn't matter. But if you, for example, if you are somehow struggling to get to 180% break effect on Ruan Mei for her passive trace, right? You can use break effect on your link rope as well, but most likely you're going to use energy regeneration. Which brings us to the last section of our guide, more or less, because I'm going to include a Eidolons 6 showcase as well as my own review when it comes to Ruan Mei. But for the guide itself, this is the last section. Team composition, right? And let me be as clear as possible when it comes to this. Ruan Mei can be used in any team composition there is, at least right now. Right? She increases attack if you're using her Eidolons. If not, she will still increase the damage you do. Generally speaking, the damage you do, right? We talked about her trace. And that obviously translates to every single character in the game, right? So you can, just a few examples for you to follow along with. You can go for a damage over time team with Kafka and Sampo, for example. Throw in Ruan Mei and let's say HoYoMix, right? And you have a really good team. Other teams you can go for are a Jingliu team, at least currently my favorite team. So you use Jingliu, you use Ruan Mei, you use, let's say, Bronya and Fishwang, for example, because Fishwang is a really good support character when it comes to crit rate and crit damage. Or you can go for a follow-up attack team, right? So Topaz and Nambi, Ruan Mei, plus, let's say, I don't know, Himiko or Herta herself in order to have your full member team, right? Your full society, Genius Society team. And as a support character, heal character, you can go for, let's say, I don't know, Locha, Natasha, Lynx, even Fishwang herself, right? All of them work, doesn't really matter. Like I said, Ruan Mei can be used in any composition there is. There are no limits to it whatsoever. The only thing that might be important to point out here is that if you're fighting against enemies that do not have the same weakness as Ruan Mei or any other character in your team, you kinda need to use Silverwolf, right, in order to apply the ice weakness or whatever else weakness you need to the enemies. So basically, if you're not, or in other words, right, if you don't manage to break your enemies because you're missing the correct elements, or if your enemies can't be broken, then Ruan Mei kind of falls off. But that's kind of obvious considering that she's a weakness break character. I don't think I need to mention that, but here you go. So yeah, once again, Ruan Mei is a really broken character. You can use her in any team composition there is, and there are absolutely no limits when it comes to it. So yeah, let us now move on to our Eidolon 6 showcase. Let us see how she performs in some of the most difficult content in the game, and how quickly she's going to clear it. Though, keep in mind, she's a support character, right? So you won't see gigantic numbers, like compared to characters like Jingliu, but nonetheless, she performs really, really well. Alright, so this one will be a little bit off script. I mean, then again, I did half the guide off script, but whatever. First up, we're gonna apply all of our techniques, obviously, right, in order to make the battle as easy as possible for our team. And after that, let us, for now, talk about why I use specific characters here. We have Fishwang, who is, in my opinion, one of the best characters you can put together with Jingliu, who is our main DPS carry here. Fishwang, like I said earlier, she gives you crit rate, and if you have Eidolons, which I do on the live server, at least one, one Eidolon, she will give you crit damage as well, right? So a really, really good character. And often you can use her for like 90% of the battle. Oh no, actually for every single battle, I think. You can use her as your only support character. You don't need a actual healer in your team. Fishwang's ultimate is enough in order to heal your team. Then we have Jingliu. You all know her, one of the best DPS in the game right now. So not a whole lot to say there. After that, we have Ruan Mei herself, obviously. And we have Bronya, who might be arguably the best support character in the game right now, right? She's broken, we all know that. And especially if you combine her with characters like Jingliu, because she can advance her actions, right? So really, really powerful. But you all know that, right? I'm gonna expect that a lot of people at least have Jingliu, so yeah. Either way, let us talk about a few things that are important when it comes to your composition, or not composition, but your playstyle with Ruan Mei, right? So you need to pay attention to your stacks. Once her skill is going to fall off, you need to reapply it, right? Like I said in the traces, in the guide section earlier on, you need to reapply it, and the same in this composition applies to Fishwang, right? You need those two to be active, but outside of it, you kinda are fairly skill point friendly, right? So you can use most of your skill points on Bronya, because once again, Jingliu, you all know her, right? She doesn't really need skill points either. except for being outside of her transcendent state, right? But all of the characters in this team are fairly skill point efficient, right? Which is, I like it a lot. Yeah, after that, when it comes to the playstyle, make sure that you try to apply the Blossom to your enemy, whatever enemy you're trying to delay, right? We talked about that. Once you delay your once you weakness break your enemies, if they have a Blossom on them, once they're trying to recover, they get stunned again, right? So really powerful, especially if you're fighting against opponents like the Ascendant, who are themselves fairly dangerous. And yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we are more or less at the end of this fight. Like one more attack by Jingliu should end it. So let us get into my own review when it comes to Ruan Mei. I think it's fairly obvious by now that I think Ruan Mei is probably one of the best characters to be released recently. She gives you insane control when it comes to your enemies, right? Weakness break is insanely broken, especially in combination with the Ruan Mei. And in the background right now you can take a look at our beautiful Stellar Hunter here. And she also is fairly skill point friendly, and most importantly, in my opinion, she is easy to build, right? You don't need a lot on her. You just go for weakness break and speed and you're good to go, right? That's kind of it. You don't need crit damage, you don't need crit weight, you don't need too much attack and all of that stuff. Just go for a defensive support character and you're good to go, right? As simple as that. Either way, that is enough for me. If you like her as well, let me know in the comments. If you like the guide, let me know in the comments. If it was helpful, leave a like, maybe sub, whatever. And yeah, I wish you all a great day wherever you live. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.